There are nights when sleep won't come, your heart feels heavy, your mind tangled, and in that silence, you turn to a familiar act: masturbation. No one knows, no one notices. Just you and that fleeting sense of relief. But then, when the lights go out, what follows might be emptiness, fatigue, and a lingering question with no answer. Am I going down the wrong path? This video doesn't judge you. It helps you understand masturbation can be a way of connecting or a path where you slowly lose yourself if it lacks awareness. In the increasingly fast-paced rhythm of modern India, where the streets are always crowded and men and women are constantly racing against family duties, work pressures, and financial burden, stress and anxiety have become familiar parts of daily life. From cities like Mumbai and Delhi to small towns in Gujarat or Odisha, many people live in a state of mental exhaustion, unsure how to release their emotions without feeling guilty or judged. In this context, masturbation, private and silent acts, become a natural way to relieve emotional tension when practiced mindfully. From a biological perspective, when a person reaches orgasm through masturbation, the body releases a series of positive hormones like dopamine, oxytocin, serotonin, and endorphins. These chemicals soothe the nervous system, lower cortisol stress hormone, and bring about a sense of relief and relaxation. That is why many people feel mentally cleansed, physically relaxed, and emotionally lighter after masturbation. In India, where traditional culture often labels topics like sex or masturbation as shameful or taboo, many hesitate to admit that this act is actually their way of taking care of their mental well-being. Especially for those living alone like the elderly in Jaipur, young women who migrate to Bangalore for work, or students studying far from home. Feelings of loneliness and anxiety can build up into heavy emotional pressure. During such times, a private act like masturbation, when done gently, mindfully, and without judgment, can become a temporary refuge from the noise and fatigue. However, as with any practice involving emotion and the body, from yoga to meditation, the most important element is mindfulness. Masturbation only truly helps reduce anxiety when it is not a compulsive habit, but rather a moment when you pause, breathe slowly, and truly listen to your body. It should be done with compassion, not in haste, not in guilt, not in shame. Just as you might light incense before Lord Shiva to seek peace, or pour water on the tulsi plant each morning to feel spiritually connected, listening to your body can also be a form of healing when done with a pure heart. And in this pressure-filled world, everyone deserves to find a moment of peace, even if only for a few minutes, even if it's just with themselves. Sleep, is not just when the body rests. It's a quiet space where the mind exhales, where worries step back, and the heart, after a long day of holding on, can finally lie still, like a calm, ripple-free lake. But on some nights, even after the lights are off, the bed is warm, and the eyes are closed, sleep still doesn't come. Because the mind is spinning, thinking, clinging to too many unresolved things. And then, on such nights, some people turn to something deeply personal, a silent, unseen acto, help themselves let go. Masturbation, not out of lust, but because they need a hand, sometimes their own, to soothe a soul that's too tired. When pleasure arrives, the body releases a cocktail of soothing chemicals. Oxytocin to calm the heartbeat, serotonin to bring peace, and prolactin, the one that makes us feel sleepy like a child after a mother's embrace. No pills needed, no lullabies, just the act of soft surrender. And many have drifted into sleep this way, quickly, gently, without struggle. But this too, heart helps us, if misunderstood, can also hold us back. If sleep becomes impossible without it, if the heart races and the mind stays loud, Unless that act happens, then we are not truly sleeping, but depending. And that's not rest's escape. Someone once said, "It's not the masturbation that makes me sleep well. It's that in that moment, I finally listen to my body." And that's the root of it. When you pause, breathe slow, touch yourself not to fix, but to be present, your body knows what to do next. Sleep will come like an old friend, gently, naturally. So if you've ever used masturbation to fall asleep, don't feel ashamed. Just remember, let it not be a habit, but a gesture of kindness, a quiet ritual before telling yourself, "I've done enough for today. Now, let's rest." There's a strange truth that many of us overlook. We live our entire lives inside a body, yet we rarely truly understand it. We eat, sleep, work, move. But how often do we pause to listen to the body as we would to an old friend? How often do we place a hand on our chest or belly and ask, "What does this place need? What is it trying to say?" Masturbation, if not misunderstood as something shameful or sinful, can actually be a gentle bridge that brings us back to ourselves. When a person touches their body with softness, respect, and mindfulness, they begin to understand what words cannot express. They discover where they feel moved, where they feel calm. They sense the rhythm of their breath shifting, their emotions rising and falling, and their heartbeat speaking unspoken truths. In cultures that honor the inner self, where people meditate each morning, or pour water on their feet before entering a temple, touching the body is not merely a physical act, but a sacred ritual of connection. When one understands what their body likes and dislikes, they begin to treat themselves more kindly. They stop forcing it, stop resenting it for not meeting expectations. They learn to accept their body as it is, not perfect, not like the movies, but real, alive, and worthy of love. For those who grew up with shame around sexuality, who were taught that the body must be hidden, the moment of conscious masturbation can be a deeply healing journey. Especially for women who are often conditioned to prioritize others' needs over their own. Touching themselves with compassion is a quiet yet powerful act. I too deserve to be touched, to be loved, to be understood. And when a person understands their own body, it becomes easier to communicate with others. There is no need to pretend, no need to wait for someone to guess right. They can express what they need through a glance, a whisper, or a quiet confidence that comes from within. Relationships, then, become more authentic, more gentle, not a chase, but a meeting. So if you've ever masturbated, don't rush to judge yourself. Instead, ask, "Am I truly listening to this body?" Because your body is not just where you live. It is your most loyal companion if only you are willing to sit and listen. There are evenings when the room becomes too quiet, when the ceiling fan spins with the rhythm of an old, repeating song, and suddenly you feel a deep emptiness inside. It's not exactly sadness, not exactly longing, but a quiet kind of loneliness, like a cup of tea left untouched or an oil lamp yet to be lit. In those moments, some people turn to prayer, some sit in meditation, some step out onto the balcony and look up at the sky, and some gently turn inward towards something deeply private, masturbation. Not to escape, but to stay present with themselves. Not to satisfy, but to soothe. It's strange, yet when the body is touched with gentleness, with love, even by one's own hands, the mind begins to soften too. As pleasure arrives, a quiet wave of chemicals spreads through the body: oxytocin, serotonin, endorphins, the so-called happiness hormones. They not only slow the heartbeat and deepen the breath, but they whisper softly, "You are not alone." In a society where many elderly people live by themselves, where women have sacrificed their whole lives for family only to find themselves hollow in old age, where men hide their emotions beneath the weight of duty, it's not always easy to find emotional support. And sometimes that support comes from within, from a still moment in the night when a hand touches the body like an act of kindness. I still feel. I am still human. Masturbation, when rightly understood, is not something shameful. It's a form of listening, a moment when you don't need anyone else to feel your worth, a time when you allow yourself to touch emotions long buried, not to silence them, but to light them up. Of course, if this act becomes a repetitive habit done in loneliness, disconnected from the heart, it can lead to an empty cycle. But if done with mindfulness, masturbation can become a kind of touch meditation, a moment to meet yourself again, through each breath, each slow movement. No one wants to feel lonely. But sometimes, in that very loneliness, you rediscover a friend you had long forgotten. Yourself. There's a simple truth that few dare to say aloud. Each of us carries wounds. Some hold the pain of an unfulfilled love. Some bear the scars of long silences in marriage. Some carry shame about their bodies because of age, childbirth, or cruel words from the past. And then there are those who don't even know where their sadness comes from. They just know there's an emptiness inside, always lingering. In ancient traditions, people found healing through stillness by drinking tea in silence, chanting sacred verses, or lighting an oil lamp before a deity. But sometimes, healing doesn't come from something outside. It begins the moment we're willing to return to ourselves, to sit with our bare truth in the rawness of the body. And masturbation, when practiced with mindfulness and love, can be a quiet form of that healing. When we touch our own body with gentleness, without force, without anger, without haste, you send a profound message. I am worthy of love, even if no one else is here. Giving ourselves pleasure is not indulgence, it is care. Just like making yourself a cup of ginger tea on a rainy afternoon, or pulling the blanket over your shoulders on a cold night. Masturbation is also where we relearn how to listen to the body when it's tired, when it longs to be held, when parts of it have been neglected for too long. For those who have experienced sexual trauma, or who have never been touched with true respect, their own hands in a safe, quiet space can become the first teacher that says, "This body is still trustworthy, still sacred." In meditative traditions, it is said, the breath is the thread between body and mind. But for many, pleasure can be a thread too, approached mindfully. It melts the frozen places inside, warms emotions long silenced, and soothes the whispers of self-blame and shame. So, if you have ever felt wounded, if you've ever felt unseen, masturbation, when done with tenderness, can be a small door leading back to yourself. Not to release, but to touch the deepest part of your heart, the part that has longed to be heard, but stayed silent for too long. However, alongside its undeniable benefits, masturbation also carries potential downsides when not practiced mindfully. What begins as a source of comfort can, if repeated too often or driven by emotional dependency, lead to fatigue, disconnection, and inner imbalance. Between the lines of self-care and escape, what matters most is not the act itself, but how we face ourselves, with awareness and compassion. At first, it's just a small, private act, done quietly, like an exhale after a long, tiring day. An act no one sees, no one judges. But over time, if not held in the light of awareness, that very act can become an invisible thread binding both mind and body. Masturbation, like anything that brings quick pleasure, can easily turn into a repetitive habit. And if we begin to use it as the only way to ease sadness, loneliness, or anxiety, the brain starts to form a familiar path. Whenever difficult emotions arise, we return to it. That's the beginning of dependence. Many people don't realize they've become addicted. Because unlike alcohol or drugs, it leaves no scent, no trace, and costs nothing. But when someone feels they can't sleep without masturbating or can't get through a sad day without repeating the act, it's no longer a choice, it becomes an attachment. In traditional culture, moderation is taught in all things, in eating, in speaking, even in thinking. Without moderation, even the smallest habits can disturb the mind. And masturbation is no exception. When done with mindfulness, it can be an act of self-care. But when done in haste, secrecy, and with uncontrollable repetition, the mind slowly dims. The body grows tired. The spirit feels heavy without knowing why. Dependence on masturbation also creates distance from real relationships. When pleasure becomes too easy, too solitary, we lose patience, the capacity to wait, and even the desire to connect. Instead of learning to open up and embrace others' emotions, we remain trapped in a private world where no one can truly reach us. And eventually, not even we can reach our own true feelings. The most dangerous part of dependence is how gently it begins. Just once. I'm too stressed today. I need to sleep. And then it repeats. And while the hand still touches the body, the mind has already wandered far away. The human mind is as delicate and sensitive as still water. When nurtured properly, it reflects the light of peace. But when constantly stirred, trapped in unconscious repetition, it turns murky, clouded, and restless. Masturbation, when overused or entangled with guilt, shame, or excessive stimulation, can subtly yet profoundly impact the nervous system and mental well-being. Many people begin masturbating simply to release pressure, but over time, if it happens too frequently, especially when paired with pornography, the nervous system is repeatedly pushed into a heightened state. The brain, which naturally needs balance between stimulation and rest, is instead exposed to artificial highs too often. This leads to difficulties with concentration, forgetfulness, and a mental haze, like a thin layer of smoke dulling inner clarity. In the long run, the sense of satisfaction after each session no longer lasts. What follows instead is emotional emptiness, unexplained sadness, or even depressive moods. Some begin to harbor self-loathing, feeling weak, unable to control their desires, and living under the shadow of guilt. The problem isn't masturbation itself, it's how we relate to it. Rushed, hidden, lacking understanding, and self-kindness. In Eastern philosophy, it's believed that mind and body are inseparable. When the mind is disturbed and the nervous system dysregulated, the body reflects it too, with insomnia, fatigue, persistent tiredness, or a general loss of interest in life. And often, the person involved doesn't realize that this quiet act, done in solitude, might be the hidden cause. So, the key is not denial or prohibition, but self-awareness. Masturbation is not wrong, but if afterward you feel dizzy, heavy-headed, low in energy, or emotionally drained, that's your nervous system gently pleading for rest. Listen to your body as you would a classical melody, where every vibration has meaning, and even silence carries a message. When you know when to stop, you don't just protect your nervous health, you preserve the clarity and peace that already exist within your soul. There is a quiet paradox that many overlook. The more we seek pleasure in solitude, the further we drift from genuine connection with another human being. Masturbation, When practiced too frequently, especially in secrecy and with intense stimulation, not only affects the mind but also impacts the body's sexual functioning. One of the most noticeable consequences is a decline in desire and disruptions in sexual performance. In the human body, the nervous system, endocrine glands, and the mind work as an interconnected web. When masturbation becomes a repeated pattern, the brain gets used to achieving pleasure effortlessly, without interaction, without emotion, without patience. This dulls the natural sensitivity of the genital nerves, making it increasingly difficult to feel aroused in real-life situations when with a partner in a genuine relationship. Many men, after years of excessive masturbation, experience erectile dysfunction, premature ejaculation, or even complete loss of sexual desire. Their bodies may still be healthy, but the mind no longer sparks the emotional fire it once did. Women, too, are not exempt. When pleasure becomes tied only to solitary, repetitive acts, they may start feeling disconnected from intimacy, hesitant to be touched, and emotionally distant in their relationships. In traditional culture, sexuality is not just about physical gratification, it's a journey of union between two souls, a communion of breath, gaze, and silent understanding. But when masturbation becomes the easy escape for every stress, people gradually lose the ability to patiently listen, to understand another's body, and to walk the full path of intimacy together. What's heartbreaking is that this decline in desire doesn't arrive suddenly, it creeps in quietly. First comes a bit of disinterest, a reluctance to engage in intimate conversation, and by the time the body stops responding altogether, it often feels too late because the habit has already etched itself deep into the nervous system. That's why masturbation must be viewed with clarity. If it takes away your ability to truly touch another body and soul, then, no matter how pleasurable it seems, it's no longer joy. It's a subtle abandonment of real life. And we weren't born to live alone forever, were we? There are wounds that don't bleed. They don't appear on the skin, but lie deep within one's self-worth, the place where we feel we deserve love, respect, and the freedom to live authentically with our emotions. And sometimes, what quietly erodes that sacred ground are the very acts we perform in silence each night, like masturbation. When it crosses healthy boundaries and turns into an uncontrollable habit. Masturbation, when practiced with awareness, gentleness, and respect for the body, can be part of self-care. But when it becomes a repetitive act carried out in secrecy, with shame under the shadow of doing something wrong, it begins to slowly fracture our relationship with ourselves. A person may feel both pleasure and shame, relief and emptiness all at once. Many, especially those raised in strongly traditional cultures, grow up believing that sex is something not to be spoken of. They're not taught about the healthy nature of physical feelings, only warned against them. So when they masturbate, their first feeling isn't easy, it's guilt. And that guilt, if left unchecked, gradually erodes their self-esteem. Over time, that person begins to question their own worth. Am I doing something dirty? Why can't I stop? Is there something wrong with me? These are questions no one answers because they dare not ask. And in that silence, they begin to lose sight of who they once were: confident, joyful, now withdrawn, low in energy, anxious around others. The emotional wounds from masturbation don't come from the act itself, but from the negative emotions that follow, especially when there is no one to talk to, no one to help make sense of it. A young man may feel unclean. An older woman may think, at my age, this must be wrong. From there, they begin avoiding eye contact, shying away from intimacy, even feeling uncomfortable in their own skin. In Indian tradition, it is believed that the Atmanth soul is always pure and can never lose its worth. But when our physical actions go against our understanding, the mind feels conflicted. And without the light of knowledge and compassion, the mind becomes the first to wound the heart. So no, masturbation is not wrong. But if afterward you feel shame, guilt, or a sense of being lesser, pause, not to punish yourself, but to ask, am I truly being kind to myself? The human body, much like an ancient temple, slows down with time, settles into stillness, and deserves to be treated with reverence and gentleness. In older adults, even small changes in daily habits can have a profound impact on physical health. Masturbation, when practiced moderately and mindfully, is not harmful. But when it becomes a frequent habit, especially in later years, it can bring about silent consequences that often go unnoticed. Old age is a phase where the body gradually experiences biological shifts. Hormone levels change, blood circulation slows, muscle tissue weakens, and the nervous system becomes more sensitive and prone to imbalance. Excessive or forceful masturbation at this age can lead to fatigue, genital discomfort, disrupted sleep, or even issues like prostate irritation in men. In many cultures, older people tend to keep such experiences private. They rarely talk about masturbation or the after effects they might feel, itches, rapid heartbeat, dizziness, or persistent insomnia. Traditional expectations often associate elders with spirituality, detachment, and letting go of the body, which makes them feel ashamed of still having intimate desires. This silence causes many to continue the habit unaware that their bodies may be quietly suffering. Doctors at senior care centers have shared cases where patients came in with symptoms like difficulty urinating, lower back pain, erectile issues, or irregular heartbeats, only to later admit, after deeper inquiry, that they were masturbating multiple times a day. For those with weaker constitutions, such repeated acts not only deplete energy, but also strain the cardiovascular system, weaken pelvic floor muscles, and worsen existing health conditions. In the wisdom of Ayurveda, it is believed that prana-life force must be carefully preserved and nourished in old age. When this life energy is drained through excessive habits, the body loses balance, leading to accelerated aging, prolonged fatigue, and emotional decline. This doesn't mean that older people must give up their bodily feelings, but it does mean learning to adjust, understanding that the body has changed, and listening to its limits. Masturbation, if done unconsciously and repeatedly, may cause the body to no longer feel like a sacred temple, but a place slowly worn down by unawareness. Old age need not deny emotion, but those emotions should be held with softness, mindfulness, and a deep love for the body that has carried us through a lifetime. Masturbation is not a bad thing. It is a natural part of the human journey where body, emotion, and the desire to connect all coexist in their own rhythm. Like breath, like hunger, like the need to be held, it is simply another voice of the body asking to be heard. And when we respond to it with gentleness, presence, and awareness, it can become a sacred moment of self-care. It is important to remember, masturbation in itself carries no shame. What creates the heaviness around it is not the act, but the silence, the guilt, the secrecy we wrap around it. In many cultures, especially those shaped by tradition and modesty, the body is often treated like something to hide rather than to honor. And so, many people grow up feeling disconnected from their own skin, ashamed to touch, afraid to feel, uncertain whether their desires are normal. In such a world, masturbation, when done with love and without judgment, can be a small act of rebellion, a quiet return to the truth that your body is not wrong, but like water, it can nourish when taken at the right time, and it can drown when limits are not respected. So is masturbation. When practiced with awareness, compassion, and understanding, It can be an act of healing way to calm the nervous system, to explore pleasure without pressure, to connect with oneself in a world that constantly pulls us outward. But when it becomes a reflex, done out of habit rather than presence, it starts to lose that healing quality. When it becomes a response to loneliness, to emotional numbness, to the ache of being unseen, it shifts. It stops being an act of self-love and becomes a form of escape. That's when we must pause. Not to judge, not to suppress, but to ask gently, what am I really seeking here? Because sometimes the body doesn't just want release, it wants rest. Sometimes the longing isn't for climax, but for connection. And when we touch ourselves not to punish, not to distract, but to listen, to truly listen, something tender awakens. You don't need to blame yourself. You are not broken. You are not weak for wanting comfort. You are simply human. The only question to hold gently in your heart is, am I touching myself with love or just trying to forget my exhaustion for a while? If you can answer that with honesty and kindness, then you've already taken the first step on the path of healing. Not because you've done it right or wrong, but because you're finally listening. And in a world that often rushes past your feelings, listening to yourself might be the most powerful thing you can do.